Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stephen Rogers, the operations manager of the Association of the United States Navy. And I have with me a special guest. His name's Sterling Schwab. He is in the Navy, and I've worked with him for quite some time. And he's going to help us through a little bit of a question and answer period with regard to our national security. I promised our membership that I would provide you with periodic national security briefings in relation to our Navy. So Sterling, first of all, welcome aboard. Can you give us a little bit of your Navy background before we get into the topic tonight?
Sure, absolutely, Steve. Thanks for having me. First of all, Stephen, I appreciate it. Thank you. Like you, I've spent actually my whole adult career in either the Navy Reserves or active duty, primarily the Reserves. Started off enlisted, got commissioned under the Direct Commissioning Officers Program as an intel officer, and I've served in various commands: 7th Fleet ONI, DIA, AFRICOM. Just had a great career. Being an intel officer in the reserves. Went to Afghanistan for a year, 2015, 2016. Got to work with our Army brethren in MI, and had just a heck of a high opinion of them leaving Afghanistan. And it's been a good career. And like you, interested in the United States' position in the world, the United States Navy's position in the world, and where we're at, and what some of our foes, enemies, and friends are doing.
All right. Well, let's start off with the U.S. Navy's position in the world. A lot of people are concerned that the Chinese Communist Party, the regime in China, is building a very, very strong Navy in the Pacific. We got Russia building their Navy. But how does our Navy shape up these days in the 21st century?
Let's start by saying this: the Chinese Navy and the Russian Navy, the Chinese Navy and the U.S. Navy fundamentally are different in many ways. We are really truly a blue water Navy. I don't know if China's really that close to being a blue water Navy yet. They certainly, by number of ships, have a lot more than us. I mean, we're floating right around 280 ships right now, a little bit less. China's about 100 more at 370 ships. Some people will say you can't count ship to ship. It's about tonnage. It's about type of ship. A lot of the Chinese naval vessels are really made for their maritime environment, where our ships are really made to cross oceans and as we say, take the fight to the enemy. So we are much different like that. But that being said, we're not looking to fight anybody, right? The United States Navy's main purpose is to keep our sea lines of communication open. That's our main purpose. So I think that's the main difference between us and China right now. Is they might have more ships. They're not necessarily blue water. We are, and we are more always really just looking to keep our lines of communication open with the world. I think China's in a little bit different position right now. We know that. If you're in this business studying China, we know what they're really kind of doing. So in that regard, I think we're okay. You always want more ships, but you also want to make sure you have the sailors to man those ships. And I will say this, Steve, in thinking about the type of sailors that the United States produces versus some of our foes, you look at China and Russia in particular. Our sailors are certainly, I think, some of the most professional in the world. We're highly trained. We're highly motivated. Our sailors are constantly in training. If they're even at shore, they might be pulling shore duty so they can be with their families, help raise their kids. They're always in school. They're always doing some sort of PQS or JQR. We are always in a learning mode in the Navy when we're not at sea.
I'm glad you brought that up, because unfortunately, on the media in this country, we hear a lot of negative things about young people, whether they're protesting at colleges or doing some anti-American performance act.
Yeah.
What's not being said is what you just said. We've got some of the best fine young men and women in this country volunteering to serve our country, both in time of peace and war. And, I was out at sea and I got an opportunity to see these young people in action. And I've got to tell you, I think that should bring comfort to the American people, and maybe some of the sailors that have been around and now retired worried about, gee, are these kids going to fight when it comes to time to fight? And I say, oh yeah, they're going to fight.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I remember in the early Sunday newspaper, and it'd take you a week to get through the say New York Times, the Sunday Wall Street Journal. There used to buy, some of these old soldiers and sailors from World War II and even Vietnam, and they always wondered, would the generation born in the 50s and 60s be able to carry the fight? Now, this generation that has carried that fight is saying, is the generation coming along in the 80s and 90s, are they prepared? Yes, I think they are. What really turned my mind around and got me thinking about this was my time in Afghanistan. Those young soldiers in Afghanistan were motivated. They were smart. They could figure a problem out. They didn't need somebody telling them how to do it. They were very motivated people. And these were 18, 19, 20-year-old young women and men. Just my opinion of them, of that generation, was much different coming out of Afghanistan. I walked away saying there's a lot of hope for this country. Unfortunately, as you just said, the media, they need the clickbait, they need the headline story, so they look for the worst that's out there. And there's the generation, the millennials, the Gen Zers, they'll be motivated. They will be, and they're smart.
You bring up a good point. World War II, especially. My father lied to get into the Navy. He said he was. He said he was. I think 18. He was actually 16.
Oh, man.
Somehow he tried it with the Army, and they caught him and they threw him out. But he went in the Navy, and he ended up on a sub chaser. We look back at the Greatest Generation, and we say, boy, those were young people in the B-17 bombers, 17, 18, 19 years old or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
But you're right. We've got the same thing today. We've got young people just kind of wanting to get involved and get involved in the Navy. But unfortunately, because of the media, we see a reduction in recruitment. I blame that on the media. And one of the things I hope to do with the AUSN, and with your help too, because you're going to be helping us out as one of our newest legislative leaders in the AUSN.
I'm looking forward to it too.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to having you on board. The fact of the matter is that messaging and education about the Navy has to improve, and we're going to help the Navy do that. We're working on some projects that the big Navy, if you will, Department of the Navy, is embracing, and we're going to help them recruit young people. And I think the way to get it out there, Sterling, something you just touched upon. Well, maybe we could replace a lot of what's in the media with all the good stuff our young people are doing.
Sure.
And what do you think of that?
That's what we should be doing. There are a lot of great stories out there about, if you just watch a History Channel, they're starting to show what some of these young men and women were doing in Iraq, in Afghanistan. And these are brave men and women. And if you call them and you tell them the truth, if this generation, they just want to know the deal, the real truth. They don't want to be misled. They're critical thinkers. They've been brought up to maybe not believe everything they hear, which is a good thing. I mean, they tend to get a little drawn in on the internet and some of the clickbait there. But overall, I would say if you tell them the real deal, the truth, you'll get them on board. You really will. And the Navy will not have a problem getting sailors that want to go to sea. Which brings us back to our original issue, right? Where is the United States Navy versus the Chinese fleet today? And are we ready? Do we have the capability? We've always had the capability, and we do have the capability. Warfare is changing, and we all see that, right? If you just, the Ukraine war has, the Russian-Ukraine war, I should say, has really been a game changer and a schoolhouse for what future warfare will look like. And it certainly won't look like anything we've ever anticipated before. We know that. Russia knows that now. China is certainly studying that. All the other major navies of the world, Britain, France, Germany, they're looking at it. India's looking at it. Australia's looking at it. We've all seen, what's happened to Russia's Black Sea fleet and how little it's really taken to sink some of these ships with really, really small weapons. We're not talking Silkworm missiles, Exocet missiles. We're talking much smaller weapons that have done a lot of damage. So in that regard, the strategic thinkers in these navies across the world have taken notice, and everybody's talking about what will future warfare look like. And I think from the United States Navy's perspective, we have a lot of smart people, way above my pay grade, way above your pay grade, looking at this and really trying to hash out what would a conflict look like, God forbid, against Russia or against China. What could that possibly look like for the United States, for NATO, for our allies? And we are studying. It is being studied.
Yeah, I'm sure what's being studied is the possibility, and this is what's on a lot of people's minds, the possibility that of President Xi of China making his move on Taiwan.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a real sensitive, tough issue.
It sure is.
But they've got to know, meaning the Chinese Communist Party, they've got to know that they're not just going to push us over. I mean, they've got to know that we've got the weapons to deal with them.
Yeah.
But the question is, what happens with a Navy now? I think we had 600 ships in the fleet during the Reagan administration, and we're down to a little over 200. But the Navy, Department of the Navy itself, wants to see more funding into shipbuilding.
Sure.
Carrier forces especially, but also you mentioned, and I know you can't get too deep into this. Remember, you and I had some talk about preparedness and all that, but you just said it before. It's going to be a whole new type of warfare.
It is.
We don't even know what's coming.
No, we don't.
But I feel like I'm going to be living in the age of Star Trek, with those laser weapons flying all over the place.
We're already there. We are already there.
Yeah,
we are. But you brought up a good point. The number of ships. I think we're floating somewhere between about 240 and 280. But that is really our warships. We haven't really talked about the Ready Reserve Force or the non commissioned ships, the USNSs. So when you add those up, you're looking at over another 100 ships right there. And so when we talk about, and I think it's the way the Navy, we break it down. So when we talk about the Navy per se and the fleets, how many ships does the 7th Fleet have out of Yokosuka, Japan? What does our 3rd Fleet have out of San Diego? And if we did get into a conflict with Russia, what can we pull from 2nd and 4th Fleets out of Norfolk or Mayport, Florida, for that matter? So we do have a lot to draw from. You add in, the Military Sea Lift Command and the amount of logistics we can bring to the fight. Because remember, it's the old battle cries, who gets there with the most first wins. And our Navy, our Military Sea Lift Command, they're really, really good at getting a lot to the battle quickly. That doesn't mean you want to fight, but it does mean you want to help defend Taiwan if it does come down to that. I think that's what it means for us.
I'll tell you, quite a deterrence, though, when you look at what you just explained. Included with that would be our submarine forces and
absolutely
and naval aviation, which very rarely talked about. But we got the best fighter pilots in the world.
We haven't even mentioned that. Yeah, we haven't even mentioned that. Yeah. Yeah. And so that I think overall that's the way we should look at it. Cautious optimism is what I would say, and for us, it's about defense. So no matter what China does, I always feel like it's a defense game for the United States. We don't want to start a war. Certainly, our country's, the United States goes out of its way overall, I think, to avoid these conflicts, especially these major conflicts. It's unfortunate what happened with Russia and Ukraine. China and Taiwan can be resolved many different ways, in my opinion. But being ready, being prepared is our main priority. Always in the Navy is being ready, being prepared, and being willing to show that we are ready. And we do sail wherever there's freedom of the seas. The Navy always has a ship, which brings us back Steve, to what you were talking about earlier. And, we're talking about China and Taiwan, but that's not our only obligations in the world, right? We're in the Eastern Mediterranean right now because of Israel. We're down in South Asian Sea, off of Somalia and Yemen. We're in the Persian Gulf because of Iran, the Red Sea. So the United States Navy has so many obligations in the world. We have a vote coming up in Venezuela, right? That we'll watch that closely. I would not be surprised if the Navy has a few ships somewhere off the coast there. You have South Africa. They have some elections coming up. You have year before last, the Solomon Islands signed that. They signed that defense agreement with China, which is just not far from New Zealand and Australia. So the United States, we're in every ocean, we're in every sea, 24/7. So our obligations in that regard, they're much different than China. China only has to worry about the East China Sea, the South China Sea. Any kind of problems they make there, their neighbors and the United States and Japan, Australia, we have to react. So they can always be poking at us. The best thing for us to do, because we have the fleets we have and we are prepared, is just make sure we're always demonstrating our will and commitment to our allies.
You mentioned Yemen earlier, and I'm thinking about those young people we talked about earlier.
Yes.
On those ships. Absolutely amazing job they've done. Not one missile coming out of that terrorist hole in the wall reached Israel, because our kids, our young people, just knocked them right out of the sky.
Yeah, a lot of cases these are teenagers manning radars, manning CICs, 18, 19, 20 years old, right? Not even old enough to drink legally in the United States. And, they're on board billion-dollar ships manning really, really sophisticated systems and helping our allies and defending their ship. It's amazing. It really is.
You mentioned that China and Russia poke us every so often. On July 24th of this year, two Russian bombers and two Chinese bombers went pretty close to Alaska.
Yes.
And our fighter jets are up there rather quickly. Now, I'm sure they're trying to measure our response with regard to these incursions, but our guys got there pretty quick, as I'm sure they're looking at what our Navy's doing in Yemen.
Yes.
And I think they better be real careful, because they may find that if they cross the line, the response will be very, very surprising and decisive.
Absolutely. And I think a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, a Chinese ship was up off the Aleutians, and Coast Guard came out to meet it.
Yeah.
So, and the Coast Guard, those are all young men and women too.
Yeah.
They are just like the Navy sailors. They were right out there, hovering right alongside of it. So, yeah, don't forget the Coast Guard in all of this as well.
Yeah. And our merchant marines, they have a big role in the defense. So what you shared with me and our audience here is that our national defense posture is good. Our national security is not as bad as the media wants us to believe it.
Not
you said before, we always need more ships. We always need shipbuilding and more training.
Yes.
And so we have an obligation as an organization, the AUSN and other veterans organizations, is to make sure that our sailors, our Marines, our airmen, who's ever involved in the defense of this country, are getting the tools they need in order to fight to win.
Yes. Yeah, always, right? Always. And the thing about the Navy too is the systems on our ships today are some of the most robust, sophisticated systems in the world. Excuse me. They might be a little bit older sometimes, but those systems are also well tested. We know they work. We know they work in battle, because our ships are being tested right now with Yemen and Iran. So we know our systems are working. Just look what we were doing for just the last 20 years, right? The amount of ships we had, aircraft carriers we had with our pilots supporting operations in Iraq, operations in Afghanistan. I mean, they got to fly a long ways to get to Afghanistan. And we had F-16s constantly, when I was there, flying off of carriers coming up to assist the Army or the Air Force where they needed. So yeah, our systems are good, they're robust, but you always have to be looking at the new stuff being developed, because our adversaries are. And certainly in Ukraine, we've seen really new, low-cost offensive systems come into the battle space.
At some point in time, I got to get you on one of those news network shows that I go on to talk about this, because you're painting a picture that should be painted. It's about the strength of the United States, in particular the United States Navy, that the people never hear. They just never hear this, and they need to hear it. So we're going to help our Navy and our country through our association get that message out, and I know you'll be a big part of it.
Absolutely, you can count on me. I will assist any way I can. I can talk until you're blue in the face about the Navy. I love this subject. I absolutely, when you look where our ships are all over the world, for the average American, you'd be beyond surprised. You'd be dumbfounded where our ships sail and what they do. And I hear especially some of these college professors talking about the colonial Americans and how we colonize, and we don't do that at all. Even the Chinese, even under Xi, they have said, we're in history, wherever the U.S. Navy goes, you can count on kind of calm waters. Countries are calm. We do bring, the Navy has always helped bring peace to whatever region of the world we can. We're really good at that. I mean, what's one of the first things a president always wants to know, besides where the aircraft carriers are, right? When he's woken up in the middle of the night. The second thing they ask, can the Navy help? If there's been an earthquake somewhere in Turkey or Pakistan or India, can the Navy get there and help deliver food, supplies, water, medical? We are always called on first to see if we can do that. So we're everywhere doing something every single day. Haiti is a great example. A couple of years ago when Haiti, you had all those problems. There were ships right off of Haiti waiting to help, waiting to assist. Remember the storms that ravaged Puerto Rico some years ago? The Navy sailed straight for Puerto Rico when it was over. Sat off the coast for months, helping make water, desalinization, ferrying, food, fresh produce into them. We're really good at doing that. We want to be able to fight too, but the Navy is a multifaceted tool the U.S. government uses whenever it can, all the time.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up with that. But now well, first of all, let people give them a little inside thing that you and I talked about. We met years ago and we served together years ago.
You're one of my first bosses.
Yeah. Would you ever believe we would be doing this
No.
all these years later? And now you're a commander, right?
I'm a commander, getting ready to retire.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're gonna miss it. I miss it.
I will. You and I have talked about that. You still miss it.
Yeah. So well, listen, you're a commander. I retired as lieutenant commander, and you've always saluted me first, but I'm going to salute you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And thank you very, very much for joining us. Hope to see you soon, and welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. It's an honor. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, and God bless you. I'll
see you soon. All righty.
Well, there we go, folks. Another episode of our AUSN Productions. What do you think of that guy, huh? There's an American patriot. He loves the Navy. He loves his country. I'll tell you that. Got a great future as he moves forward. And he's joining us here in our legislative corps. He's going to head up some of the team of working for legislation that will advance funding and other things that the Navy needs in order to move forward. So that's it, folks. Until our next episode, I'm Stephen Rogers, Operations Manager of the Association of the United States Navy, and thank you so much for joining me. God bless you, God bless our Navy, and God bless America.